Hi, this is Ian Volner. You can read my most recent piece for Artforum on the National Gallery renovation in London at artforum.com, and you are listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Every serious modernist fan knows about the case study houses, the legendary program started by John Intenza of Arts and Architecture magazine in the 1950s, attracting top and emerging architects to create affordable houses for Los Angeles. Today, we'll talk with Dustin Bramell, who's working to create a new series of case study houses. We've also got Cary Odell on the great Buckminster Fuller, or Bucky to his friends, and later, mother-daughter duo Sarah and Debbie Dykstra share the story of their Frank Lloyd Wright house. Then we'll close with some lovely piano from Lenore Raphael. And now, your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. Picture this. It's post-World War II LA. Everyone's jazz. The boys are back, and they're all like, hey, we saved the world. We beat the Nazis. Let's build some houses. Enter Arts and Architecture magazine, the coolest of the cool publications. And they're saying, hey, let's solve the housing crisis with a contest where famous architects designed experimental homes. Architects like Craig Elwood, Richard Neutra, Charles and Ray Eames, and Pierre Koenig used these amazing new materials that were left over from the war. Steel beams.
Cool.
Plate glass.
Wow.
Asbestos. Woo! One of those did really work out. The point was to make these homes affordable and replicable, like Legos. The case study houses were instant hits. People flocked to them, all eager to see the future of living, which apparently involved a lot of sliding doors and a lack of privacy. However, these affordable, replicable homes ended up being anything but. Most of them became bespoke, highly sought-after architectural masterpieces. You know how your grandma said she made a simple casserole, but it took her 6 hours and cost $200? Kind of like that, but with incredible views. Still highly prized today, the case study houses continue to inspire designers around the world. You can see them all at usmodernist.org/masters. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Dustin Bramell is the co-founder of a bold reboot of the Case Study House program in Los Angeles. But instead of a post-war affordable housing shortage, this version is powered by climate change, modular design, and the January fires that took out Pacific Palisades and Altadena. The Case Study Adapt program was launched after Bramell lost his family's 65-year-old home in the Pacific Palisades fire. He's coordinated an A-team of LA's top residential architecture firms to design fire-resistant, energy-efficient homes as the area rebuilds. Here's George's conversation with Dustin Bramell.
Dustin, before we start talking about architecture, let's talk about race cars. I understand that you raced for a Volkswagen at one point. What were you doing, taking a Scirocco around the course? What was that all about?
Yeah, this was probably in the early 2010s. Maybe even a little bit before that, but they had a series called the TDI Cup, which was a bunch of diesel Jettas. They start with about 3,000 people that apply to be a part of it, and then they ultimately narrow that down to the top 30 drivers. I had been a car enthusiast for a while and worked in the industry for a little bit in college. And so after college, I thought, hey, why not try to take a stab at becoming a professional driver? In a very naive way. I now learn that, to do that, you have to be starting when you're 6 or 7 years old in a go-kart and then, working your way up through the ranks. But yeah, it was a fun endeavor to go down that path. Met a lot of great friends. Actually, my brother-in-law is a professional race car driver. I introduced him to my wife's sister, and they're now married and have kids. So I still get to kind of, live vicariously through him. but it was just one of those, funny life detours.
So was this just like NASCAR type racing around a track, or were you on test tracks, or what kind of venues were you racing in?
It's all road courses. So sports car is kind of the class of cars. So there's, NASCAR, Formula cars, sports cars. So this was primarily sports cars that I was, doing a little bit of dabbling in.
Okay. And any tips for Volkswagen drivers?
God, it's been so long. Try electric. I'm not sure.
Okay. I am so thrilled that you have pulled together this group called Case Study Adapt, which is using the inspiration of the Case Study Houses program from years ago to create new affordable homes for not only people who've lost their homes in the fires in Los Angeles, but also people who are looking to be inspired by these homes as well. So thank you for that. Tell our listeners a little bit about the history of this. What were the Case Study Houses?
So actually, the Case Study program was originally created by John Intenza, who owned Arts and Architecture magazine. And he had bought a plot of land in the Pacific Palisades on a street called Chautauqua in 1945. And that was really the birthplace of that program. The first houses weren't built there. They were built in other places. But ultimately, that's where John Intenza's house was. That's where the Eames house is. Those houses, by the way, made it through the fire. They still exist today. And I would actually drive past those houses every day. I live on Chautauqua as well. And I lived in a mid-century modern house designed by an architect named Matt Kivlin, who was a surfer turned architect. He actually is in the Surfing Hall of Fame. I think his claim to fame is that he invented the balsa wood surfboard. But, I lived in this mid-century modern house on the same street as the original Case Study program. And so when we lost our house in the fire, the next day I called my best friend who comes over every Friday for pizza with the kids. And I said, we have to bring back the Case Study House program. It started on Chautauqua 80 years ago. Let's bring it back and let's have it this time kind of update to not focus on just modern living as we knew it, but modern living as we now are sort of faced to contemplate, which is really around how do you build climate resilient homes. The original Case Study program obviously had a lot of connection with the house relative to its surroundings. And I think the thing that was potentially missed in that program is that our climate over time would become a lot more volatile. And so having the house interact with the nature around it, we actually have to think about different ways of doing things. And so we developed this program with the goal of really creating a new type of architecture, which Noah Walker, one of the program's participants, shared with us. He said, yeah, I've been thinking about this idea of new century modern. So how do we take all of those ideas from the mid-century, but update them for the new century and kind of the reality that we live in? So yeah, it's been a blast working with all of the architects thus far and all of the clients that we're bringing on board. We aspire to build somewhere between 10 and 20 homes to start, and then we'll see where we go from there. But yeah, it's 10 really great architects.
Well, you've pulled together really an Avengers level team. Who are some of the architects you have on your squad now?
Yeah, so we have everyone from Marmal Radziner to Woodson Dangaren to, and all of these are names you're familiar with because I've browsed the work on U.S. Modernist. We have Barbara Bester, Johnston Markley, Jeffrey Von Oyen, Standard Architecture, Montalba, UIRC. I'm trying to think who I'm missing. It's hard to remember 10 right off the top of your head, but I think that most of them. Noah Walker, I mentioned him. Yeah, so we have a really great group.
That's fantastic. Now, is this project, Case Study Adapt, is this the same thing as something you started called Protect the Palisades?
No, that was actually a different project. I I don't know what got into me. Maybe it's my sort of coping mechanism, but I just started doing a bunch of different things. One of the big fears that I think a lot of people in the Palisades have, and certainly in Altadena as well, is that we kind of have these standard, track boxes put in place of what were really interesting architectural homes in the past. Everything from California bungalows to mid-century moderns to Spanish style, et cetera. And so Protect the Palisades, we're actually just trying to match local buyers with local sellers. Two of my neighbors, for instance, one is 91 years old. One is 86 years old. They're thinking obviously about selling. And I just thought it was important for them to try to sell to somebody who was already local. My daughter's kindergarten teacher, for instance, is a renter in the Palisades, and she's the type of person that obviously would love to have as a homeowner in the Palisades. And so the idea was, could we connect younger generations with older generations that were thinking about selling so that we could kind of maintain some level of community ownership rather than having, kind of mass developers come in and buy up everything.
Keep the carpetbaggers out, so to speak.
Yeah, well, you said it.
Exactly. Now, your daughter's school was burned, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old daughter and son, respectively. Our daughter's school, Pally Elementary, was lost in the fire. Actually, one kind of bright spot is that the historic part of the building, which contains the oldest bell tower in Los Angeles, that building actually remains intact. And so we're going to be able to build around that, obviously. My son's school, thankfully, he goes to a preschool, and that school was not lost in the fire, but obviously smoke impacted. And so both of them have moved to different locations, but it's really great. And it's kind of an awesome continuity that they have the same teachers, same kids in their class. And so, they get to go to that. It's a different campus every day, but they get to go and interact with all of those same people. And that's been a really kind of bright spot in this whole crazy journey that we're on.
Well, to extend the Avengers analogy, you guys must have a great PR agency, because I found out about this, first of all, when you had your, I guess, first meeting, and that first meeting was covered in Architecture Digest and other places as well. I mean, what a tremendous launch.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So as I mentioned, the day after the fire, I called my best friend he's a multi-time entrepreneur. He and I have both started companies.
Is this Leo Siegel?
Leo Siegel, yeah. And he started a platform called The Expert. I said to him, we have to bring back the case study program. And he said, yeah, let's do it. And through his relationships with The Expert, he emailed Arc Digest and said, hey, this is a thing we're thinking about doing. Would you guys be interested in covering it? And they graciously agreed. And, we were kind of off to the races at that point. We didn't actually know any of these architects on a personal level before this. And so we just started reaching out to people with the idea. And out of all 10 architects that we reached out to, every single one of them said, yeah, we want to be a part of it. And so it's just been a really incredible kind of couple of months here as we've gotten to spend time with these architects as they've gotten to spend time with each other and talk about the ideas of how do we rebuild not only these neighborhoods, but also the optimism that modernism inspires. And that's just been a really inspiring thing to be a part of.
And you've also got a Kobe Smulders role in this. You've got Jamie Rummerfeld of Save Iconic Architecture on the team.
Yeah, so she's one of the founding board members, and she's been great in, sort of helping us think through this entire architectural landscape. She was responsible for a lot of efforts to save really iconic buildings. And so, those buildings are really kind of the inspiration for the program. And it's really important that those are maintained over time. And so we thought that it was really important to have her as part of this.
Your group initially met in March, and it's now summer. What's the timeline for Case Study Adapt as far as trying to get the first house underway?
It's a great question, and it's a moving target every day. I recently had my lot cleared by the Army Corps of Engineers, and in that process, they actually missed a structure that we had. It's a hillside lot, and so we have a structure that's down at the bottom of the canyon, and they missed that structure. So now they have to come back, right? So every day there's things that change. My hope is, though, that these are some of the houses that are the earliest to be built in these neighborhoods, because like the mid-century program, we really hope that they're a point of optimism for people as they think about rebuilding. And I think that in order for us to be successful on that, we have to be some of the first people on the block so that other people can look at what we're doing and say, wow, there's something really cool about that, and I want to participate in that in some way. And so I'm going to make my house fire hardened, or I'm going to take steps to really think about sort of the footprint of the house on the lot, which in many ways has been lost in our neighborhood. in the neighborhood, we've had a lot of homes that have been built that are basically, the real estate professionals will tell you that they're maximizing value, which really means that they're maximizing the square footage on the lot. And we just think that there's probably other ways to measure value of these homes, and certainly the architectural beauty of the homes is a big part of that.
So you're trying to make it smaller than people are historically planning so that you can get better quality out of the square footage you have.
Yeah, and certainly a better interaction with the garden. A big trend in the Palisades in particular was to build kind of setback to setback to setback.
Like Malibu.
And so one of the things that we hope is that people do have a little bit different of approach of what is value moving forward. So we are capping the square footage of all of these homes at 3,000 square feet.
Okay, good.
The most recent kind of national average, I think, was 2,411 square feet. You know, some of the homes that are going to be built are actually going to be smaller than that. We have some of the commissioning families are going to be building in the 2,000 square foot range. Others are going to be building in the 1,400 square foot range. So it's really exciting to just think about kind of the future of architecture and building in Los Angeles and think about how this program might impact that in some way.
And so have you worked a deal yet with a publication to be your broadcast for all of these as they come out? What's going to be the arts and architecture of the future?
Well, I think the most obvious is Architectural Digest, which is why we went to them. And so, yeah, they plan on publishing the announcement, which went out obviously prior to this podcast. And then sometime in the fall, we expect to release all of the initial designs. And then obviously the publication of the homes will come over time as those homes get finished, which will happen in, at kind of different timelines for each individual project.
This is very exciting, what you're doing. I hope it pulls off because a lot of people have talked about reviving the case study houses program in the past. This sounds like the most likely to actually achieve it.
Well, we certainly hope so. And we're putting in the work to make it all happen. The most encouraging thing is just how excited and on board all of the architects have been. It's just been such an influential program in all of these architects' education and through their practices. And so, yeah, if there was ever a time to do it, now feels like the time to make it all work. The original case study program obviously was a response to this kind of post-war era where people were trying to kind of live more optimistic lives or think more optimistically about how they move forward. And this program, I hope, does the same thing, that we actually build these homes and they become kind of an optimistic point of view about how we can live in these environments that are frankly just more challenging to live in today than they were maybe 100 years ago. So yeah, that's the hope.
The website is casestudyadapt.org. Thanks so much for talking with me, Dustin.
Thank you.
That was George with Dustin Bramell. In 1960, R. Buckminster Fuller built a home unlike any other. A gleaming geodesic dome dropped onto a quiet corner in Carbondale, Illinois. It went up in a single day, looked like something from outer space, and was the only dome Fuller ever actually lived in. Today, it's a historic landmark, and author Cary knows that story better than anyone. Bucky's Dome, the resurrection of R. Buckminster Fuller and Anne Hewlett Fuller's dome home in Carbondale, Illinois, tells the story of this strange, beautiful home and the decades-long effort to restore it. Odell is also the author of June Cleaver Was a Feminist and Women Pioneers in Television, books that reframe the way we think about pop culture's women. George spoke with Cary via Zoom.
Cary, before we talk about architecture, let's go back to one of your previous books.
Okay.
Where you talked about the female characters of early television. I think of June Cleaver and Dennis the Menace's mom as being like super traditional, but in your book, you really point out how they were more feminist. How does that work?
So many people are basing their opinions of those characters and other mom figures from TV, including like Donna Reed and Jane White on Father Knows Best, on the appearance of them in their formal dresses, in their heels. A lot of that was generated by TV tradition. But if you watch the actual episodes, you find women like June Cleaver, like the characters played by Donna Reed, who are very smart, very accomplished, very sassy in a way, who know their ways around a joke, around a comeback, and usually far smarter than their husbands. And unfortunately, we don't get that reported in the popular press, and sadly, often not in the so-called scholarly press, where we love to say things like, well, we never had a smart woman on TV until, Mary Tyler Moore, or
Right.
we never had a working woman on TV until Mary Tyler Moore, or something along that lines. And that is so blatantly untrue. First of all, we had a lot of working women on TV in the 50s and the 60s. Women like Beverly Garland on a show called Decoy, where she played a policewoman. We had a show called The Nurses on in the early 60s that followed the lives of two female nurses. We had Barbara Stanwyck on The Big Valley.
She was a very strong figure.
Oh, yes. And so if you look at all these things in total, you find that these are much stronger, savvier, smarter women than we ever give them credit for. And I'm still being amazed by all the female characters that working as I do at the day job at the Library of Congress. I still get to watch a lot of shows, things that people don't even have access to, even with all a multitude of platforms and streaming sites and whatnot. So I am always discovering new female characters and things like that. Lately, I've been on an early sci-fi kick. A lot of people think TV sci-fi star was Star Trek. That might have been the pinnacle, but in the 50s, we had a lot of shows like Captain Midnight and things like that.
Time Tunnel, right?
With Lee Merriweather as a scientist on that show. I think of Lee Merriweather and Dinah Mulder and actresses like that, and their aforementioned Beverly Garland as the proto-feminists of TV. They always, always, always play strong, capable women.
And Lee Merriweather's still around, I believe.
Lee is still very much around with us. And then she would follow the time tunnel with her wonderful work on Barnaby Jones and stuff like that.
And Batman.
And Batman. Well, in the feature film, she was the feature,
Okay.
Oh, and my book had a foreword on it by Yvonne Craig, the late, great Yvonne Craig, who played Batgirl. But I mean, there's working women on TV in like 1949, before most people had heard of TV. And there's also women working behind the scenes. They never get their credit. There were sitcoms with working women in it. Like there was a show called Willie with June Havoc as a female attorney. There was a show called It's Always Jan with Ann Jeffries as a business owner. There was a show called Lady Boss with Lynn Barry as the head of a construction firm. We don't talk about those shows.
Yeah.
That's what this book was meant to be, to reassess the characters we do talk about, but with a very limited vocabulary and understanding, and to also bring in and remind people that just because you don't see these shows syndicated now doesn't mean they didn't exist.
Well, I love your variety of interests, and another person who had a great variety of interests was Buckminster Fuller.
Oh, yes.
And I have watched Buckminster Fuller videos of his talks.
Yeah.
He talks very fast, and he's almost incomprehensible to the layperson. So for people that don't really know Bucky Fuller, tell us what he's all about.
Buckminster Fuller is probably best known as one of the great visionary architects of the 20th century. He did not necessarily invent the geodesic dome, but he refined it and popularized it. So all those geodesic domes that you see on campgrounds, as homes, as vacation homes, over stadiums, used as storage on farms and things like that, all of that is thanks to Buckminster Fuller. He lived throughout the 20th century because he was born like in very early part of the century, maybe late, I can't remember, 19th century. He was a poet, published author, teacher, architect, as mentioned. He also had at one time had the longest entry in Who's Who because all of his different diverse interests and things like that. He had more patents than almost anybody I've ever seen, including boats. He was a skilled sailor, so he was always redefining boats and things like that. But it's the geodesic dome that is his largest contribution. I've always been fascinated by domes. I grew up in Illinois, not a huge dome capital, but I went to school at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. And Bucky taught there for about 10 years. He started in 1960, and he retired from the university in 1972. And when he lived in Carbondale, he lived in a geodesic dome. It was the only dome he ever lived in, he and his wife. It was also the only home that he lived in. And I later wrote a book about the history of the home. This is the ironic part. When I was a student there in the late 90s, I knew Bucky had taught there, but I had no idea there was a geodesic dome home in town. It wasn't until years later that I saw a mention of it. And my brother lives in Carbondale. I said, there's a dome home? Because when I was there, the home was still in private hands. And also, it's just like in a normal neighborhood. You have all these like pre and post-war houses, these square little boxes, and then all of a sudden this dome. So it wasn't well known at that time. When the gentleman that owned it, who bought it from Bucky, decided to sell it, it was purchased by a professor at the design department at SIU. And his idea was to restore it. The home is sort of fallen into disarray by that time, although a lot of its renters over the years and its second owner did a lot to try to keep it up to snuff.
Yeah.
It was bigger than most of them could take on. The later renters were all students. They don't have deep pockets. They tried. I interviewed them all. So he decided that someone should buy the dome and put it back to how it looked. And then being the author that I am and writer that I am, I decided to write a little article on it. And I sent it back to the dome board, the people that were working to reestablish the dome or repair the dome. And they liked it, the article, mainly to fact check. And they said, Cary, we're sort of looking for someone to write our history. Would you do that? Or would you be willing to do that? And I just finished the June Cleaver book. And I thought, yeah, I think I can.
Yeah.
So that took a couple of years to do. The book came out. All the proceeds from the book, by the way, go back to the dome. Myself and my co-author, Thad Heckman, who is the architect, was the lead architect on the restoration, we collect no residuals from it. It all goes back to the dome. And after years of blood and sweat and tears and a lot of fundraising, the house is back to almost how identical to how it looked the day that Bucky moved into it in 1960. The original colors and the estate, the Bucky Fuller family has donated back some of the original furnishings to it as well.
Is it owned by a private party now, or can somebody stay there?
It's owned by a foundation.
Okay.
And it is on the National Registry of Historic Places. It's also considered a state landmark, and we're hoping to have it named National Landmark in the very near future. It is available for tours by appointment. We thought at one time about turning it into an Airbnb, but we've worked too hard for somebody to get crazy in there. So we don't have that, but we are happy to show it off. We're very proud of all the work we've done. We're working now on restoring the yard to it. And then across the street, we are building a visitor center so that when people come to Carbondale and want to see the home, first they can go to this visitor center across the street, learn all about Bucky, Bucky's life in Carbondale, learn about the house, how it was built in one day in 1960, and it was built in one day in 1960. In fact, I had a birthday yesterday. And we're doing a GoFundMe now to finish the visitor center. Then they can go over to have a tour of the dome and really have the full Bucky experience in Carbondale. And so that's what we're working on now.
Fuller was known for some really large, significant dome projects around the world.
Yes.
What were some of those?
Well, like the Montreal Dome at the World's Fair, he was in charge of. He called that his Anne's Taj Mahal. That was the name that Anne was his wife. He built in her honor, and it was used at the World's Fair. That was in New York. And then there's a Montreal Dome that is still standing, although the outer skin of it was burned off some years ago. But the form around it is still standing. There's the St. Louis Gardens. That's a dome that I believe Bucky designed.
Is that the Climatron?
Yes.
Climatron in St. Louis.
And then there's a lot of other domes. Some have just been dismantled now. There's a lot of homes that are still standing that Bucky had a hand in designing. But we love the one in Carbondale because that's the one he actually lived in for 10 years.
Growing up, I would read Popular Science and Popular Mechanics. Both those publications loved Bucky Fuller.
Yeah.
And followed everything that he ever talked about. And they kept predicting that one day we'd all be living in domes because it seemed like the most logical thing. So why didn't that work out?
Oh, I think that's open to a matter of opinion, but even architects can make a mistake. And when we acquired the dome, meaning the board that I now serve on, there was leaks going on, things like that. Bucky saw his home as a work in progress. So he built it. And he also had this philosophy that maybe homes aren't meant to be forever. You don't keep your car forever. So after a while, you trade up. And the original dome home was built for only about $60,000 today.
Okay.
Back when Bucky built it, it was about $7,000. So a real bargain either then or now. So the home was a test product. It was also tied in with a company called the Pease Company out of Ohio. Bucky had contracted with them to start selling these dome kits, and one of them was the home. Actually, you see quite a few domes, but they're mainly being used for stadiums and things like that. I'd love to live in a dome. I think it'd be great fun. But I think it would be challenges because you don't only have flat walls unless you build an inner structure or things like that. There can be sometimes a lack of privacy. Like it was just Bucky and his wife that lived at the dome, so they were used to each other and things like that. I still think they make a lot of sense. And that's why we see them now in places that you need immediate shelters, be it disaster zones, places affected by famine or natural disasters. Red Cross, the other relief agencies go in there and build domes. And that's why you see them on the North Pole and the Antarctica. They're very cheap, efficient structures, and they work. So hopefully domes will come back. We will learn from them and benefit from them.
Now, what else was Bucky Fuller famous for besides domes? Because you said he had all these patents and all these interests.
A lot of them are over my head, but he patented a lot of boat materials. He patented trusses for easy building. One of his early patents was on another sort of brick formation, a more stable and easily stackable brick. I can't remember all of them. They are in the book. It took a long time to reveal all that. He was a prolific author. He authored 10 books during the 10 years that he was in Carbondale. That's an incredible amount of productivity. I thought I did well with my books, not that good. So he was also a lecturer. He taught not only at SIU, but he traveled extensively throughout his life. He was very popular overseas, in Europe, in the Orient, giving lectures and things like that. He was also known as a great man of peace. He really advocated that, science would lead us to a more peaceful coexistence with each other. And that's certainly a message we can still hang on to.
What is Bucky's legacy? What do you see him really contributing towards the future now that he's gone?
They used to say, think different. They used it as a sales slogan, but they also meant it as a way to keep with our problems. And I think that's what Bucky brings to us, a great faith in the future. We love all these dismal scenarios and stories now where the people, destroy the world, the planet they're living on. Bucky believed in a better, powerful, rewarding, positive future. And he did it with his innovations, doing the most with the least amount of impact on people and on the planet that we really need today, as much as we needed back in Bucky's heyday in the 60s and 70s.
The book is Bucky's Dome, The Resurrection of R. Buckminster Fuller and Anne Hewlett Fuller's Dome Home in Carbondale, Illinois. Thanks so much for talking with me, Cary.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was George with Cary Odell. Sarah and Debbie Dykstra are the mother-daughter duo who took on the monumental task of bringing Frank Lloyd Wright's last project, River Rock, to life in Willoughby Hills, Ohio. Sarah purchased the property in 2018, which also included Wright's 1955 Lewis Penfield house, and together they tackled Wright's unbuilt 1959 design. It's not an easy job to honor Wright's vision while meeting modern building codes. Sarah and Debbie opened River Rock for overnight rentals so you can experience Wright's legacy directly. Here is Sarah and Debbie Dykstra's conversation with George.
Frank Lloyd Wright owners are notoriously energetic and have lots of patience, and sometimes discover they have to have bottomless wallets. So what was it that possessed you all to buy a Frank Lloyd Wright house in 2018?
We were living in Florida, and my brother wanted my nephew to grow up in this area where we all grew up. So he got transferred with his job back here, and he asked if we wanted to come up and join him. And so I did some searching. I was looking for a house where my mom could go back and forth because I wasn't ready to move yet. And the first house and the only house I saw and looked at was the Penfield house. And the first picture I saw was the staircase in the Penfield house. And it just went from there. I mean, we put a for sale by owner sign in my house in Florida, put in a contract with Paul Penfield, and in about 2 weeks, we had deals on both properties, my one in Florida and my one here. And so we were off to the races.
So was it a love at first sight thing for you when you saw this house?
It was. There were a couple things. One, we didn't even realize that the Penfield house was here. We had moved away years before, and it wasn't a rental when I was growing up or when you were around here. It wasn't a rental, so we didn't really know anything about it. That was one. And two, in the ad for the home listing of the Penfield and the property were two other homes that are part of the property, which was the original farmhouse and barn that had been converted into a cottage. So it really fit our family, what we were doing then. And third, in the listing was this project River Rock that had never been done, which just really blew my mind that nobody had ever done it. And I think that kind of sealed the deal when I read the listing and I got, the family together and I said, what do you guys think? And they were all in right away. And here we are.
Now, when you got there and you found the reality of the house, What kind of shape was it in?
The Penfield house is in very good shape. So Paul Penfield did a full renovation of it in 2002, 2004. And so that house was in very good shape. The cottage and the farmhouse were in horrific shape. So we spent the summer, our first project and our first 1-year plan was to renovate those houses so that we could live in them.
Okay.
So we rented a house. We all lived in it together, one house, with 3 dogs, 2 cats, 1 grandson, 1 married couple, my daughter and myself.
Wow, that's a lot.
10 months we lived there. That was a lot. And then she and I came to the house starting around March and started looking at what we needed to do and how we were going to get the people out that were renting already. And they finally left in May. And then we got busy doing a complete renovation in the farmhouse. I did an addition and a renovation in the old barn. So that took us until October and November. And then by December 1st, I moved in. You moved in
October 1st.
October 1st.
The Penfield house was originally designed for someone who was tall, which was very unusual because most Frank Lloyd Wright spaces were for average height people or less.
Correct.
What are some of the differences in the Penfield house?
It's interesting because when I walked into that house, it was always very big to me. You know, it's tall, it's massive windows, a big giant living room. And it seemed like it was the opposite of what his houses were. And then when we were doing River Rock, we did field trips. We did a lot of research on Frank Lloyd Wright and other homes that he had built during that time. We learned about compression and release as his philosophy. And I realized later, after we studied that if you're 6'8", it still feels compressed when you walk into the house. If you're 5'2", it doesn't feel so compressed, though it does compress you horizontally when you walk in because everything's real narrow, but it's real tall. But I imagine that if you're 6'8", the whole thing feels compressed.
So you walk into the
great room.
When did you start working on the River Rock house?
We submitted for permits in June of 2023.
Okay.
And we broke ground October 16th of 2023.
So do you just go down and fill out the forms? Do you have to check in with the Frank Lloyd Wright people for anything to get special blessing on this?
So we did reach out to both Conservancy because I've had John Waters here to see the Penfield house and I'd met him my first summer here. So he knew that what we were up to. And we reached out to the foundation and we talked to Stuart Graff and he was pretty much like, be careful what you say. Don't say it's a Frank Lloyd Wright house. We want you to say it's inspired by, because he's no longer here. And I said, well, it's really not inspired by because we submitted the original 9-page plan for permitting. Our architect that we had on site was like, it's not my design.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Frank Lloyd Wright's design. And so we landed on with the foundation that we would say it was built from the 5909 plan set.
Okay.
And we've kind of stuck with that. Didn't want to get into any big arguments with them at the time. We really focused on just getting the house done.
Yeah.
But we did want it to be structurally better because of Frank's notorious, sagging cantilevers or leaking roofs. We really wanted to, in 2023, be able to take the technologies that were available now and make it a better set of plans. So we did do supplemental designs for additional steel, under the roof and between the roof and the ceiling. So we did a lot of work there with our structural engineer and our architects. We all went to the city or the county, and the architects worked with the county to get some variances on things because we didn't want to change the look of it. We didn't want to make things bigger or different if we didn't have to. And so the county said, as long as you're not building 14 of these, you're not doing a development, you're not setting a precedence for building, you're building one home with a historic slant to it, really, emphasis, we'll let you get through. And I don't remember all of the specifics on what the architects talked about. I think one of them was the efficiency code.
And the windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things like that they were going to, that they said, it's okay. We're going to let you slide on a couple things. But we did submit the original plans with a few drawings for supplemental engineering, structural engineering. But other than that, we tried to stick to the form of what it was.
Any of the changes other than the one bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a set of plans that were at the Avery Library at Columbia that showed this plan, but it had a different configuration for the bathroom, for the primary bedroom. And when we started looking at the original plan, it called for a bathtub that really wasn't going to fit. So we went with the configuration from the Avery Library plan.
But we switched it. We used that as a precedent that we
Yes.
could make a change in the bathroom.
Right. So we closed off the one small bedroom so that the primary bedroom really had a primary bathroom. Anyway, we changed that bathroom, and that really is the only change from the plans that this house has endured. Everything else is exactly the same.
And what kind of roof have you got on the Penfield house and the River Rock houses?
So the Penfield house has a rubber roof,
Mm-hmm.
and it leaks. We are trying to book an appointment to get somebody out to possibly give us a new roof.
Yeah.
This particular roof, it's about 90% is a metal roof, and the flat piece, the flat component, which is really just the kitchen roof, is a product called Kemper, which is kind of like a roll-on rubber that dries and is waterproof.
Yeah. How can people visit these houses?
So we have both houses we offer for overnight stays. It's a 2-night minimum, and River Rock is riverrockhouse.com, and Penfield House is penfieldhouse.com. And we are trying to set up some tours later in the summer.
Okay. I assume that the community is kind of excited about this. I mean, this is unusual to have 2 Frank Lloyd Wright houses, and particularly you're the newest one on the planet right now, right?
Yeah. The newest one and the very last residential plan he drew.
Oh, really?
So these plans were sitting on his drawing board when he passed. And the Penfields didn't think they were going to get them because he passed away, and they thought, okay, we're not going to have this second set of plans. And the reason that they got the second set of plans in the first place was that they were building Interstate I-90, and they were going to take over the Penfield house and put I-90 through that property.
Oh.
And Louis Penfield went back to Frank Lloyd Wright and asked for a second set of plans. And the time that Frank Lloyd Wright had passed, they decided to move it more north. So he knew he wasn't going to lose his house. So it was kind of like, okay, he passed away. We didn't get the plans, but at least the freeway is not coming through our original house.
Yeah.
And a week after his funeral, those plans showed up.
That is really fantastic. I hope to get up there and see it for myself.
Yes, we'd love to have you.
Well, thank you both so much for talking with me. What is the website people can go to again?
It's www.riverrockhouse.com and www.penfieldhouse.com.
Again this week, we'll close out with music from Lenore Raphael, an internationally celebrated pianist, Steinway artist, and award-winning composer. She sold out iconic venues like Dizzy's Club at Lincoln Center, the Blue Note, Birdland, and Ronnie Scott's, and she's graced major jazz festivals from London to Johannesburg to Tel Aviv. With 10 CDs on Swing and Fox Music, she's also the jazz director at New York's West 64th Street Jazz Club and the Haley Cultural Arts Center in Apex, North Carolina. Here's Lenore with My Foolish Heart.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Malibu, Palm Springs, Los Angeles, and Toronto.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Got a guest to suggest for the show? Write her at bobby@usmodernist.org, spelling that B-O-B-B-I-E. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.